from Matt. He says, this question is intentionally a little open-ended. What role should watt kg or power to weight ratio of lean mass play in goal setting and general preparation? So we've talked about measuring lean mass before. You can do it with DEXA scans. You can do it with like a Garmin index scale, or there's a ton of different scales that you can do that give you an estimate of body fat percentage and lean mass as well. And they'll tell you how much each of those weighs, and you can track it separately. That can really help when you're trying to like detach from the overall number on the scale, because that overall number on the scale can, it isn't very representative of body composition. Instead, it's just like an overall number. So, okay. Matt says, for example, I've peaked at 5 watts per kilogram for the last 2 years, first at 70 kilograms, then at 74 kilograms. During both peaks, I had the same amount of lean mass, and he may have mistyped this section when we were reading through. So we're just going to assume a few different scenarios. Okay. So he says, during both peaks, I had the same amount of lean mass. Last year, I was just carrying extra body fat. Looking at lean mass only, though, I went from 5.55 to 5.9 watts per kilogram. So once again, he may have made a mistype there. So some of this was due to having more structured training under my belt. The additional fat is enough that this year it's leaving me wondering about the importance of fat loss versus power development and preparing for peaking later this summer. So I just want to address this question in a few different general ways. And I think that it will help you, Matt, and it will help other athletes. But this is the whole question, right, Nate, of is it better to weigh more at the same, is it better to weigh more and to raise your power basically, or just to be the same?
Yeah, and I think I understand Matt's question. Is what he's saying is if you just looked at lean mass, his lean mass stayed the same, but his FTP went up. So that's why he went from 5.55 to 5.9. Mm-hmm. I would, which is possible, but probably not likely. But anyways, let's just talk about gaining weight to be faster, because that's the better one.
Mm-hmm. Because that's like, honestly, so it's a big fear, right? Because Amber, being a pro cyclist, this was your job, was to make sure that you were at a good enough power to weight ratio, because that determined your ability to carry speed, right? Mm-hmm. So we did a podcast with Ben Jacquemain on this, where we talked about when he said that he allowed himself to gain weight. He went through eating disorders and extreme, I guess, health issues, even with this whole thing, trying to make himself as thin as possible. We have this huge temptation. How did you wrestle with this in your career, and what solution did you come to?
Yeah, I want to touch back on Ben's interview too, because I think that's really germane here as well. But I struggled with this a lot. I mean, I'm 5'10", so I'm not a typical cyclist. The stereotypical cyclist, we'll say, is generally fairly petite and lean. And I came from swimming. I have big, broad shoulders. I'm tall. I'm quite a bit taller. Usually on most teams, I was at least head and shoulders above most of my teammates, which has generally made me feel big. I mean, it's, and those two words, tall and big, have very different connotations. And I definitely felt big. And that was a source of, it was a big source of stress, because in cycling, there is such an emphasis on watts per kg. And we can't deny the reality of that. It definitely is a fact, it does contribute to your ability to go uphill fast, for example. But one of the things I finally kind of wrapped my head around, because what ended up being detrimental for me was the stress around that, was feeling like I didn't have the right body to be successful in the sport. And I was thinking that while I was being successful in the sport, I was winning races in this very body that I worried was not, appropriate for the task. And even though the evidence was right in front of me, because I kept comparing myself to this particular stereotype, I always felt like I wasn't quite measuring up. And finally wrapped my head around this and realized, when I'm training, I'm asking a lot of my body. My body, by its nature, is adaptive, and it's adapting to the load that I'm asking of it. So if I'm fueling my body appropriately and I'm giving it what it needs to adapt to this load, my body is actually going to be able to optimize better than if I were the one directing that optimization. So our bodies are really wise. They know what they're doing. And I realized I just need to train really hard and give my body what it needs. And that's going to put me in the best position to perform well. And in fact, it did. And that meant that, I was never going to look the way that a stereotypical cyclist looked, but I realized that was actually okay, because what was optimal for my physiology, my frame, my build, my genetics looked different than what the stereotypical cyclist was. And that was okay, because I could still win races just being me. didn't matter how much I restricted calories, I was never going to be 5'3". That's just not going to happen. But that really helped. And Ben's interview was really interesting too. And we can talk about that a little bit, but he talked about one year he was coming back from injury and he was so intent on getting fit fast. He really wanted to get his fitness back so that he would come into an early season team camp with, and just really be able to throw down and prove himself. So his strategy for this was really interesting. He just trained as much as he possibly could every day. And then he just ate as much as he possibly could every night so that he would be recovered enough to go train as much as he possibly could the next day. And so he stopped worrying about the kg part of the equation. And he just focused on how much can I actually train? And the best way to load up on the training was to fuel himself. And he just did that for this huge block going into his season. And he had one of the best seasons he'd ever had. He was carrying more weight, but what he found was he could repeat efforts better than he ever had in his career. So he would get to the top of a climb with the lead group the way he always had, but he had so much more left in the tank after that climb. And he would be able to repeat those efforts through races and from race to race in a way that he never had in his career. And it was very eye-opening for him. And it was an accidental discovery because of this injury and trying to come back quickly. But it's something that's to be considered. And Chad's got some notes in here. There's multiple ways of looking at this. But I thought that was a really interesting anecdote from Ben being at the professional level, similarly discovering that he actually could perform in a body that wasn't necessarily the body that he thought he needed to have in order to be able to perform.
Yeah.
I want to say before Chad goes to his deep dive.
It's not a deep dive. It's just a couple comments.
Short one. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to talk for Chad because I like to do that.
Get it in there. You'll probably say everything I'm going to say. So it'll lighten
in general, besides very few cases, I think it's almost always better to be heavier and have the same watt kg. As a heavy person, I see this all the time where I'll be 4 watts per kilo and it'll be a 135 pound man who's 4 watts per kilo. There's almost no situation where that person is going to drop me or beat me in anything racing. That's because in a crit, I'm going to have much more, if I get separation, my power on the flat is going to be so much more, and my aerodynamic drag isn't equal to how much more power that I can put out, right? So I can make separation. The only time that it's really going to be an issue if it's a really steep climb, like watt kg doesn't mean you always climb the same speed at all gradients. And as it gets steeper, I did this math once, I don't remember the right one it is, but as it gets steeper, the weight matters even more, and it's not just watts per kg. I would also say, Matt, in this case, I don't know. I've looked at this for weight training too. Just because you're saying you had 4 kilograms more body fat, but you were faster, and that was the reason why you were faster. Maybe it's what Amber said. You were fueling yourself through training. Your aerobic system went up. You happen to gain some fat too, but that's why you're faster. So the fat itself is not like pushing you through. Another way, gaining muscle mass too is the way people do it. And that can also usually lead to being a faster cyclist also when paired with aerobic training. If you just gain muscle mass and don't do aerobic training, you're probably not going to get any faster as a cyclist. Chad, does that say everything you're going to say?
Some of it overlaps for sure. I kind of want to home in on but the additional fat is enough that this year. So let's just talk about your concern over the additional fat. First off, we always have to view this contextually. We can't just say what is right for you is right for Vincenzo Nibali or is right for someone who's straight off the couch who's never raced before. So I look at your watts per kg, and even when you don't relate it to lean mass, you're still at 5 watts per kg. So I assume you're a reasonably competitive rider, probably very competitive, at least in your capabilities. So then you just have to go back to reducing it to course characteristics, right? What are the type of races you want to be good at? And what is the impact of gravity? Do you have to do climbs? Do you have to do the steep climbs that Nate just described? Do you have to accelerate a lot? Because accelerating more mass is more work. Then you have to consider your level of competition. Are you an age group athlete, or are you at the way high end of things, a really pointy end with national, international, and world level competitors? Those are things that are going to sway you a bit, But I think in all cases, you still have to prioritize health first. And I wish that world level riders would do this, but their consequences are different. If they don't perform, if they don't optimize, maximize everything they can, a lot of the time, the expense of their health, well, they may not have a job. They may not perform well enough to get picked up next season. They may exit the sport feeling like a failure, or they shouldn't have ever been there in the first place. All these consequences are much greater in magnitude than anything any of us as amateur athletes are likely to face. Prioritize health first and then performance next. And the beauty of it is that if your health is spot on, if that's where your focus is, then the performance usually follows suit. So it kind of handles itself. You're doing the training, you're nourishing well, you're keeping yourself healthful. Maybe a couple extra pounds keeps you, even a fat, keeps you from being sick, keeps you in just a generally healthy state so that you can continue to train, you can continue to progress. Then again, what I'm saying, the performance follows. And I'll use myself as an example. My best racing, I managed to get myself down to a scant. I actually touched 165, but that was just water weight. I was down to a pretty reliable 167, and I was racing well. But over the course of the season, I just stopped paying attention to weight. I just stopped weighing myself. I didn't like how I looked, didn't like how I felt. Yes, I was racing well, but I started nourishing better, sometimes intentionally, sometimes less intentionally. It just happened. I didn't focus on it. And by the end of the season, I had gravitated back up to 175 pounds, which is, 8 pounds. So 3 or 4 kilos, substantial amount of weight loss, but I wasn't racing any worse. In fact, I was racing just as well, if not better. I could do more. I could train more. I mean, the season just got progressively better over the course of it. And my weight came up over the course of it pretty steadily.
When we talk about pro athletes, if you're a pro, your part of your job is to form your life around your career so that it supports your career, right? And that goes for everybody. That's why we have bedtimes that have to do with when we have to get up and be ready for work, right? We all form our lives around our careers. Now, professional athletes, part of their job is to form their life with precision so that it allows them to be able to perform on the bike. And what I'm getting at here is that an athlete will try to remove as much external stress as possible in order to be able to train and put as much of the stress that exists in their life into the training aspect, into physical stress that comes from training, and then eliminate the rest. So that will look like they aren't going to go out and have a late night with friends doing something, or they'll pass on those things. They'll pass on the big home improvement project that they want to do, and they'll find another way to get that done, whether that's other people doing it or delaying it for a certain period of time. You do that because you're trying to optimize things down to the nth degree. Now, that's a really fragile way to live. And what it does is it puts you in a position, if you're that optimized, that if anything goes wrong, you are right on the edge. So you instantly fall off that edge into the water, right? You can tell where my fears lie, into the water. But that's what happens when you try to run things so close to the edge. Some people say, fly too close to the sun, you get burned. It's the same thing. And for average athletes, I'd argue, so when we look back in the past and we think, man, I was really fast at that time and I was really lean at that time, and we try to piece it all together, if you actually look at your ability to perform consistently, if you are really running things down the line, I guarantee you had sporadic success. You had bright spots, but you weren't able to repeat that, not just in the same workout, but day after day, week after week. It's really important that us average people are durable. We have to be able to accept what life gives us and still be able to stick to our training. And part of that comes down to our nutrition and what we're doing. If we're trying to run ourselves down to the very thin edge the whole time, it's just going to be so easy to get sick, so easy to get tired, so easy to be too fatigued to be able to complete the workouts like we need to and make improvements. So there's a huge temptation to follow this. But for all of us in particular, where it's not our jobs to be pro cyclists, I would encourage us to focus on the watts, not on the kg. And if you do that and your weight may rise, I guarantee your power will rise. But above all, you'll be able to be more consistent. And we say this like a broken record, but athletes that can train consistently over time, they're the ones that get faster. I know that sounds super simple, but if anything, we should be trying to pattern everything to allow us to be able to train consistently rather than just go up a hill quick. So that's, I think, important guidance for all of us. A lot of athletes probably do with a bit more weight because it probably helped them be able to be a bit more consistent. That can be a tricky thing to wrestle with, but don't be afraid to let yourself consider that. don't feel like you absolutely have to be up against the ropes for everybody listening to this.
If you like this video, make sure you give us a thumbs up.
If you didn't like this video, you can give it a thumbs down, but let us know what you would have done differently in the comments below.
If you want to see more of these videos, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you want to become a faster cyclist, check out TrainerRoad.com.
Do it.